This is the Impressions Exchange Podcast. Where all topics impacting the graphic imaging and printing industry are addressed via in-depth news coverage, analysis, and timely interviews.
Hi, I'm Denise Gustavson, the Editorial Director for NAPCO Media and the guest host for the special Printing Impressions podcast series in celebration of Women's History Month, highlighting women in the printing industry. During this series, I'll have the opportunity to talk with women from all segments of the industry about their experiences and their journey as a woman in the printing industry. So today it's my pleasure to welcome Jill Fletcher. She's the Regional Vice President with Thomas Printworks. Jill, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm so glad that you're here today. So I know you're a Regional Vice President, so can you tell us a little bit about what your role is within Thomas Printworks and a little bit about Thomas as well?
All right, Thomas we'll start with them, is still a family-owned company. We have stores in 4 states around the country. I think we have 23 locations total. And my job is managing the 6 Florida locations, ranging from Southeast Florida all the way up to Orlando.
Awesome. So that means you're in the Sunshine State.
That is correct.
I might be jealous. I'm in the Northeast, so I would very much like your weather. That's for sure.
Yes.
So how did you get started in printing? That's a big question.
It is a big question. I will tell you, when I was in high school, which it's been many years, trade and industry was not a female option.
Mm-hmm.
So they built us in my hometown in the Northeast with a new high school, which allowed us girls, a few, to take shop, woodworking, and printing was one of the options. And I was like, oh, I want to do that, only because it was different as opposed to economics. So that's how I got started. And we had small duplicator presses and CompuWriter 4 in our lab. And I got the bug back then.
Awesome. So I have to say that's probably, since all the women that I've spoken to this month so far, you are the first one that has actually had that experience of like learning about print in high school.
Right.
Which is very, I want to say, unfortunately, it's very odd because most people, I don't think, really have any introduction to print until much, much later on in their career.
True. And then what that allowed me to do is I continued my education, and actually my degree is in officially printing production management from Rochester Institute of Technology. So
you're an RIT graduate. So
I'm an RIT grad.
So what has that enabled you to do? So obviously you're working now with Thomas Printworks, but what has been your journey, after you got your degree? How did you proceed after that?
Right. Well, the first thing I did was I moved south. I went to Texas from Rochester.
Right for the warm weather. I do not
right
blame
to
you.
the south. So I was very fortunate to work for a company there that was actually at the time a typesetting house. It wasn't, digitally. They had old Mercantile Linotype, but they had just converted to digital. So I got on with their team there, and from Houston, moved to a printing company in Austin, which was traditional print.
Okay.
Typesetting department, and converting them to digital. So that's where it really started.
And so that now you're two companies
in, and then from there, in the mid 80s, I moved to, which was becoming the trend, to a service bureau.
Okay.
To be able to keep that connection to type. I worked for a couple of companies, in Austin that were cutting edge at the time, new Macintosh people. It was a big deal. So we grew up with the change in technology. And then just over time went to work for companies that had just started to dabble into large format color and never looked back. So everything since the mid 80s has been large format color. Early vehicle wraps, direct e-transfer, all kinds of stuff.
I remember eStat.
So.
Oh yes, I remember it well.
Yes, exactly.
That was when I started in the industry. It was the late 90s, and there were still lots and lots of companies doing eStat at the time.
Right. Exactly.
So you've seen technology-wise so many different things over the course
Yes.
of the years.
Yes, and it's still changing. And the key, I honestly feel, to success is staying ahead of that curve. What's next? What's going to be better? Even if it's just materials, keeps us striving forward.
Definitely does. And it keeps us fresh and it keeps us learning.
Exactly.
Even, I would even say it keeps us young.
Yes, absolutely. Because it's always a challenge.
Always a challenge.
So,
So, over the course of your career so far, I mean, you've had many different jobs. Has there been any one person or one of an association or a group of people that have really helped you to get where you are today?
I will tell you, at the advantage of RIT at the time was still pretty much male dominated.
Mm-hmm.
But the professors there, both male and female, were really good at coaching the women that were there on how real life was outside of the university setting, how to deal with a board room full of men, and right down to simple things as how to shake hands. And we had like a whole lecture on practicing professional ways to shake hands. So
Who would have thought we would need to have that? But it is interesting, right?
It is, because until you put it to use, handshaking can be very intimidating if you've never done it. And most people think women are dainty.
Oh, I've gotten a lot of those handshakes. Just the tip of the fingers.
Tip of the fingers, exactly. So it was just an interesting take on it, and a lot of communication skills, how to talk to people. So that gave me a good foundation to get started.
Yeah, definitely. Now, then the question is, as you entered the workforce and you've been working, and as you said, printing has been very male dominated over the years. It's getting better, which is really,
yes,
really
it is.
good.
And I honestly believe that I would suspect it's slowly, at least it's got to be 50-50 by now. And that's, I think, a change in technology, which has allowed that to happen.
Yeah, I'm sure, especially you look at like a lot of graphic designers, they are women. I mean, there's a lot of women even in leadership roles. And I mean, we'll talk a little bit about that too, as we're moving forward. You're in a leadership role. I mean, there's so many more women in the workplace, because I think part of it too is society has changed as well.
Absolutely.
So in many places, 2 salaries are required, unfortunately.
That's correct.
Both the husband and wife, or 2 partners, they need to work. They both need to work to pull in a salary. So it wasn't a matter of a luxury to be able to stay home.
That's correct. That is correct.
So what is it like as you're going through this industry? Have you had to choose from having a career, having and building a family? Is that something that you experienced? And is that something that women today are still really kind of working through?
Yes. I mean, being a working mom, I was very fortunate to come from a 2-income family, but we needed both incomes to be able to live in the neighborhood we wanted to live in. You couldn't afford it on one income. But then it was a neighborhood where a lot of the moms didn't work. So I was one of the working moms, and I was always usually just skating in the gate during football games, or to get there for practice. But it was very supportive, you know what I mean? Even though at the time I felt a little bit guilty for working, because I wasn't there all the time for every family or whatever. But other moms were very supportive too. They didn't judge. But that was, I think, a unique situation.
Yeah, I can imagine a lot of places, you might have had some of those, stay-at-home moms. They may have judged, oh, look at her, she's coming in late again.
Right. Exactly. But I was very fortunate that didn't happen. Right.
So for you, you really didn't have to choose. You could have
Correct.
a career. You could have family.
Yes. I was very lucky.
How did you balance it all?
My time management skills, I think, are very good. Although looking back at it, I was pretty tired. I honestly feel I did not start taking care of myself until my kids were much older and out of the house. When you realize you're not the priority, work's a priority, family's a priority, and then you have this third little sliver of time, left for yourself, and you have to learn to deal with it, which of course, now that I've grown children, my health and my physical abilities are my number one priority before everything else. You know, I had the opportunity to switch it back, to focus on me. So,
which is good, because
yes,
it's definitely needed. That self-care is required, so that way you can do whatever you want to do to the best of your ability.
exactly. So, and when you're younger, you can skate by sometimes, I think, you know, on less sleep, not the best nutrition. It's just
Grabbing stuff on the go as you go.
exactly.
Now, I mean, you've already talked a little about working moms. How do you approach stereotypes like that? I mean, in some cases you have the working mom, but then you might have the aggressive woman as well in some of those
Right.
leadership roles, which some people think very poorly of as well.
Right.
You know, do you deal with those stereotypes at all, or how do you deal with those? Or how did you?
Well, I think when I did run into them, and I'll ban moms for lack of a better description, were pretty dedicated women, and it was like their main job was taking care of band kids, so they could be pushy, basically. They needed volunteers or whatever, and a lot of people didn't understand limited free time, which was tough. But I think just being honest with them really helped get past some of that. But it was, I think, just you have to coach yourself to let you know that you're doing what's best for you and your family, and you just have to move on and just not feel guilty about working, because that doesn't do anybody any good.
Yeah, and there's no reason to feel guilty. But
Right.
you can understand though inside that,
Oh, absolutely.
you know, am I giving 100% to my children? Am I doing what's
Exactly.
right by them?
Mhm.
Am I doing what's right by the company that's employing me?
Yes.
You know, I think as women, we tend to have a little bit more of that thought about it too, and that worry.
Yes, exactly. You know, am I doing enough? You know, am I going to be, you know, am I doing enough at work if I leave here 30 minutes early to make it to band practice today, or whatever, t-ball practice, whatever it happens to be? I mean, is it my turn to drive? I mean, and there were some years where, just because of the position, I never drove kids to practice because I wasn't able to get out of work in time.
So you had to rely on your support network of other
My
moms.
support network of other moms, other dads. It just, and you have to be open and honest with those people, because I think most people understand, as opposed to we can feel guilty thinking they just assume that you're not doing your part.
Yeah.
So, and it all comes down to communication, how to communicate that without feeling bad about communicating it, and just being honest about the situations.
And that goes back to some of the stuff that you learned at RIT.
Yes, exactly. It all circles back.
It all circles back. And now, one, I think also you had mentioned all of those things that you learned at RIT also help you in the industry when you have to stand alone in that boardroom.
That's correct. You know, how to stand in front of a group of 30 people or 100 people, and how to stand up there. And a lot of it is building your confidence. You know, the first time's always hard, or the first time you go up with a microphone on. There's a lot of, it's just a learning thing. And it comes back to not being afraid to take a chance. If you stumble on your words, it's okay.
We're more critical of ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
But then, you know, the thing is, you know, how do you build that confidence? You know, it's easy to say you need to be confident, you need to be, but what's the best way to build it? I
honestly feel is you have to be, number one, given the opportunity. And I have been very fortunate. I have been given the chance on numerous occasions, you know, to just learn to build that. And then you have to be afraid you can't be afraid to not take the chance. If somebody offers you something, sometimes you just have to go for it, you know, even if you've never done it before, and just do it. You know, and I think that's a big part that we need to learn as women, that it's okay to stumble and it's okay to try.
So now when you're talking about women specifically, you know, as we're seeing more and more women entering the workforce and entering the printing industry, what do women bring to the industry that maybe men don't. Not, I'm saying not all men, are there certain traits or characteristics that really emphasize why it's important to have women in the industry?
I really feel a big difference, or more women can empathize with people and empathize with situations. And sometimes that can be a double-edged sword, because they can just ignore or accept things, bad behavior sometimes, but you have to learn to empathize and still, let's face it, most of us are in business to make money. So there's a fine line, but you have to be understanding, to look at a situation and look at the last few years, dropping into COVID, coming out. A lot of people had kids that they had to homeschool, and my hat's off to them, because I can't even imagine.
I've seen some of the workloads. Yeah. I have friends that have kids, and looking at their math, and I'm like, I have no idea how they're teaching math now, because it's so different than what I learned.
It's so different. Yes. And just to be able to restructure your entire life, it's amazing what some of these people have done. And as a company, we've been very, very supportive of that entire situation here at Thomas. Sometimes, if kids had to come into the office, we could put them in a conference room somewhere so that they weren't home alone. We have people on staff that their work is important, so they have to, not everybody can work from home. I mean, this is not a business where you can take your work home.
Yeah, especially if you're working on a big, large format press.
Exactly.
You can't take that home.
You can't take it home.
I'm going to hitch it to the back of my SUV and take it home
and
for the
just
night.
Be fine. And I'll bring it back tomorrow, I promise.
It doesn't work that way. I mean, yes, there are jobs that can. CSRs, some of the customer service positions, some of the other positions.
Sales, yes. Absolutely.
Finance, it's easier to do those and remote into a computer, to work from home. But there's certain things that just, especially in printing, it's hands-on. You're creating physical pieces.
Exactly. And it's really hard for other people to understand that. I know I was in Austin during most of the pandemic, and we were downtown and watched the entire city close around us and be boarded up. And we were the only open business, because our office was across the street from the convention center. We were the only ones coming to work. Mm-hmm. Everything else, the hotels, the restaurants were all closed. So it was a very surreal feeling.
Creepy is kind of my thought.
Creepy is, it was pretty creepy. It's very quiet, no traffic at all. It's coming back. We've turned good. Yes.
You're a woman, you're in a leadership role, you're a regional vice president. How important is it to have women in positions like yours or other leadership positions, especially for those women who are just starting out?
Oh, it's definitely important. A lot of times, I will tell you, a lot of printing companies are small, so they're like husband, wife,
mm-hmm.
And usually when I started, the wives did payroll, took attendance, made sure the clerical end of the business was taken care of. And that's when I first got into the business, that's what I saw. And then as the industry has changed, more and more women have gone into production. They're not just CSRs, they're actual operators or pre-press people, finishers, packagers, whatever. So it's opened the door for the technology for women to just come right in and succeed. And, the more women know about the ground floor of the business, the more successful I think they'll be, because you have to understand what's produced.
Mm-hmm.
And I came up through production. So, I understand the process. I've grown up with it as the technology's changed. I think what is hard is to walk in fresh now, not knowing all that history, has to be overwhelming. Just substrates alone.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Right. To start from scratch, just the terminology. It's like any field. You've got your own set of terms. We have our own measurements. We don't eat.
Yeah, you have your own way of doing things. And then even from company to company, it's going to be different.
The language is different. That is correct. So we even see it from region to region. What we call something here in Florida is the same project has another name in Texas.
It's not surprising given the English language and just the the differences even with certain objects, like a sandwich is named
Right.
so many different things in so many different regions.
Exactly.
So, honestly, it's not surprising to me that even within the printing industry and the regions of the print industry,
Right.
things are called different things, and you're spread over 4 states. So
yes, exactly. So it's, so we've learned, and then that all falls back to how to communicate consistently between our shops, because we share work across the states. So we have to be able to, I need to be able to send something to Phoenix and make sure if I need, for instance, 3mm Sintra, they need to know that their 3mm Celtec is basically the same product.
And it's funny, and I'm guessing you probably have like a company-wide like glossary. This is
Pretty
what
much.
this means, and this what this is. These are equal.
Exactly. I could show it to you. I have one. And I think part of that is because of this is the age of mergers and acquisitions. When you start bringing in other companies, technologies, you have staff that can't even agree on what to call something.
Yeah. And Thomas has had a lot of acquisitions over the
Yes.
last few years.
Yes, we
So
have.
getting all of those companies on the same platforms, talking the same language, or as close to the same language as we can.
Right, as possible. Exactly. So, I mean, we've done a really good job. We have a really good team. And I will tell you, there's a lot of women in management in Thomas. And we have some very open communication forums, set meetings and stuff to discuss current events, for lack of a better term, but current projects, stumbling blocks, troubles that, different areas are seeing and stuff, and ways to just exchange ideas, which is important.
It's very important to have that open line of communication with between management, between those that are in the press room.
Exactly.
Because in some ways, those two groups live two very different lives.
Absolutely.
So if they're not talking to each other, they don't know really what's going on in either.
That's correct. And with our supply chain the way it is, it's critical.
Absolutely critical.
Yes.
The supply chain is just completely crazy right now.
Yes. And it's changed the way we've done business, because before you'd say, oh, I want this paper. And it was like, okay, some purchaser somewhere would find you the paper. Well, now it's not to be found. And the substitute's not even available because XYZ print shop down the street just bought all of it up.
And then you hope that maybe you can barter with somebody. Hey, I have some of this. Can I get some of that? It's so crazy, when you have to go through your backups and your backups to your backups, and to see what's going to work for those applications.
Yes, and it's going to be interesting to see how these mills come back online, what they will decide to offer as they start bringing more and more. The need is there, obviously, but it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do as an industry. So,
yeah, agreed. And then with the issues that we had in Texas last year with that cold snap, I mean, that impacted the chemical industry, which impacted glue, which is your adhesive-backed vinyls. It's just it's kind of crazy. I mean, and we've talked about it too, is just how so many things are interconnected nowadays.
That's correct. And we don't even realize it. Why we need resins. Why are resins important? Well, everything has them.
Yeah, it's crazy. How you take out one little piece of that puzzle, of that domino line, and things just stop.
Right. Exactly. And of course, as an industry, when you look at adhesive vinyls, well, we've bought up as businesses any vinyl that was sitting anywhere. So stuff that you would never use before, or set your priorities, you're down to your fourth preference as far as adhesive vinyls, and the shelves are empty basically.
Yeah. And then it's a matter of on the floor, it's making sure those ICC profiles are correct and making sure that you can get the color consistency you want.
That's correct.
Because it's a different substrate that you might not have worked with before, but you have to work with now.
Exactly. Yeah. It had its own, it's just another challenge.
It keeps everybody on their toes. That's exactly the least.
And now, I will tell you, the only other thing that this has really affected is the amount of price increases. We've all seen, but as an industry whole, our costs have skyrocketed for raw materials for us.
I can only imagine, because I mean, I work for a publishing company and
Mhm.
our paper costs have doubled,
Right.
and they're not even sure they can get us paper.
Right.
It's one of those things. It's like, well, yeah, we'll charge you double if we can get it for you.
Right. Exactly.
I don't think any of us foresaw some of these changes and
No.
the inflation, and just some of it, obviously, our customers were okay with, because they're like, okay, it's
Yes.
going to be temporary. We're just
Right.
seeing a blip now. But now that it's a little bit more entrenched, it's going to be
Yes.
harder to pass those costs on.
Exactly. And, initially it was easy to pass them on because everybody understood,
Yeah.
but it's not stopping. The increases are coming almost daily. And it's almost like, the gasoline prices, this vendor just had a 10% increase. Surprise. Oh, it's effective when? Oh, Monday.
I mean, every night we hear on the news, oh, it's up another 5 cents, another 4 cents,
Exactly.
with the
Mhm.
gas prices. And I guess that's what we're seeing even across the board with raw materials for you guys.
Yes, exactly. Mhm.
Yeah, nobody wants to hear that
No.
things are going up anymore. So
Right.
I can't imagine having to have
Yeah.
that conversation with customers.
It's just, because it's getting old. They were okay in the beginning because everybody understood. Now it's like, okay, but you already used that excuse.
Well, it still works.
It still works. Yeah, it's still real. And they will never go back down. I don't feel the pricing will ever go back down.
It's always hard for things to go back to where they
Exactly.
were.
Mhm.
Once that cost and people are pay for that cost,
Exactly.
it's hard to get it to go back down again.
Exactly. Unlike gasoline, which we hope will eventually come back down.
Hoping, fingers crossed, that that'll go back. Otherwise, I think we're going to be stuck at home because we just don't want to use our cars. But that's
Right.
so now, as we're starting to wrap up our conversation today. You obviously had a start in printing from a young age,
Yes.
which, compared to most of the women I talk to, most people have just really, like, if it wasn't a family business,
Mhm.
they've kind of just fallen into printing,
Right.
which is, so your path is actually very different than most. But
Yes.
I just don't know. I don't know how many schools are left for people to follow your path anymore.
Especially in the public system, when you start at the younger school, I mean, less and less of those classes are even offered. I mean, I see stuff all the time where people are fighting to get just home economics back in, auto shop. It's tragic almost, because it's a very lucrative field to be in.
I mean, for me, thankfully, when I grew up in New York, so I had a junior high school that had shop classes. We had, we had an auto mechanics, both in our junior and our senior high.
Right.
We had those different options for us.
Right.
So, like, for
Exactly.
me, we were also required to take some of those shop classes
Mhm.
just to introduce everybody to them.
Exactly.
So for me, I know how to handset type because I've done
Right.
it. I've worked
Mhm.
on a one color press. I've made
Right.
stuff. I've used routing machines and wood machines, so that way I can create, at least some basic skills.
Correct.
But I don't know how many schools nowadays have the money to do that, or the facilities, or even the teachers or the educators to be able to
Right.
provide that kind of introduction.
Exactly. Because I mean, I in the Northeast, I don't know a lot about the Florida school system yet. I haven't been here long enough. But in the Northeast and in Texas, there are trade schools still.
Mhm.
You have to make that decision almost before you know the decision you're making, to be a freshman and say, okay, I'm going to the trade school. I don't know where that guidance comes from.
I don't either, honestly. And I think in some cases, with print not being front of mind for some people as a career option, they're not even,
Right.
it's not like they're going to think about it.
Correct. I mean, and there's so much between marketing, even direct mail, which is a big part of the print industry now.
Mhm.
So powerful what can happen in print, not just magazine print, but just
Print in general.
promo stuff, personalization, all that stuff. It's like, it's pretty high tech.
It's very high tech.
You get to, just tracking demographics, tracking responses. I mean, it's not just ink on paper anymore.
It's ink on everything.
Exactly.
Plus data management and data
Yes.
mining and all of the IT services that all of the shops need to have
Exactly.
in-house
Yes. Mhm.
because of different, privacy concerns and security issues.
Exactly.
That's not a
Mhm.
lot of the stuff you can't ship out to other companies
That's
to
no, you
handle.
can't. You need to be able
Because
to handle it in-house.
yeah, because you as a printer, you're responsible for that data. If there's
That's
a breach,
correct.
then it's your problem, and then you have to deal with that.
That's right. And it's teams of people that make that happen,
Yeah.
and all the
So
need leaders. So there's room for
Mhm.
growth. And that's the thing I think people forget, is that there are ladders to climb in the print industry. It's just attracting people, I think, is the big deal. And there's a lot of competition for employees now.
oh God, is there ever? And that's the question. It's like, where do you find that next person? Especially those that haven't been introduced to print at all, that have no background. They're not going to a trade school. They did the 4-year college, but then there's also people that 4-year college, it's not for them. For them,
Right.
they would be much better off at a 2-year college. But
Exactly.
when you get to that fork in the road
Right.
during your educational career, your education process, is that even offered?
Right. And I think maybe as an industry, we need to approach those 2-year schools that have that pool of people that are looking for work. It also affects what benefits do we offer people coming out of school, because like I said, there's a lot of competition for youth employees and people that you can bring into the fold, because it is a learning curve, and it takes time because you have to be willing to teach. And that comes back to that too. Nobody is going to walk into a print shop and hit the ground running. There are people, that's not true. People with experience can do that, but new people, they need a lot of coaching and a lot of training.
They need that mentoring, and they need people that
Yes.
are willing to mentor. And I think
Yes.
in the industry as a whole, a lot of people that are in print are willing to mentor, to take the time
Right.
to teach, because they're realizing, in many cases, the industry is aging out. So
Yes, exactly.
what's going to happen on the other side?
Exactly. And that's real. It is. It's true. I have, reached, I'm not ready to retire, not even close to retirement age yet, but I'm on that other side of that curve, that where,
You have
sooner
to start thinking about what's
thinking about it.
Yeah. So it's very, very interesting.
Yes, it is. So, I'm not even have the discussions yet. So I'm not going.
You have plenty of time to have those discussions.
I'm not ready for that. No.
So my last question, it's one I've been asking most of the folks I'm talking to, is what advice would you give young women or even yourself when you were starting out in the print industry?
I would say, I think initially, even though this has been in my blood, for lack of a better term, is try not to let people intimidate you, because it's out there. And not just men, other women too can be intimidating, and you just have to learn the skill set to get past that. That believe in yourself, you're good enough, everybody's good enough, and with the right circumstances, you can be extremely successful. And don't be afraid to move if something is not right. I think I have had a couple jobs where I should have left sooner than I did, only out of fear, that I wouldn't be good enough somewhere else. When you start questioning yourself.
There's a certain safety in the known.
Exactly. And just learning, when it's okay to leave. But I've been with this group team here almost 20 years. So it's like, I'm not going anywhere. I have found what I need, both professionally, and which allows me the time to grow personally. So it's a balance.
Yeah. And it's finding that balance. And like you said, not being intimidated, also not letting somebody else make the decisions of your career for you.
Correct. That is correct.
Jill, I've had an awesome time talking to you.
Oh, good. It's
We've
been fun.
talked about so many different topics today. We kind of covered the gamut.
Right.
So I appreciate
Wonderful.
taking the time today to chat, and I'm looking forward to another conversation with you.
All right. That sounds great. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.